One knock, one bowl of soup, and a second chance neither of them expected. Welcome to our storytelling channel, where every knock might open a new chapter in someone's life. If you've made it this far, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're watching from. We read everyone. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. A brand new story, full of emotion and unexpected turns, is coming tomorrow. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next chapter. The night air was sharp, the kind that cuts through even the thickest coat, and Jessica Miller, 39 years old, felt every bitter gust as she trudged down the quiet suburban sidewalk. The rain had turned to sleet, pelting her face like tiny shards of glass. Her boots were soaked, the soles worn thin, and every step made a soft squish that echoed against the empty homes of the neighborhood. She had been walking for nearly a mile and a half through the icy streets of Minneapolis, her breath visible in the freezing air, her hope hanging by a thread. Jessica wasn't just wandering, she was searching. Rumors had spread through the shelter line that a new facility had opened nearby, one that still had space, one that might offer a warm bed and a hot meal. It was a small hope, but hope nonetheless. With her coat pulled tight around her thin frame, she peered at the house numbers, her vision blurred from wind and exhaustion. Her fingers, stiff and red, clutched the piece of paper with the address scrawled in shaky handwriting. And then she saw it, a large stone house, its porch light casting a soft glow through the falling snow. The number matched. She hesitated. At the gate, this didn't look like a shelter. It looked expensive, regal even. Tall columns, a pristine lawn now blanketed in snow, and large windows glowing with warm light. But she was out of options. Desperation drowned out doubt. Jessica stepped up, raised her trembling hand, and knocked. A moment passed. Then the heavy oak door creaked open, revealing a man who looked just as surprised to see her as she was to see him. He was older, perhaps 70 or so, with silver hair slightly tousled as if he'd just woken from sleep. He wore silk pajamas, a thick burgundy robe, and house slippers. His eyes, though tired, were sharp and alert. The heat from inside brushed against Jessica's face, and for a second it made her knees weak. I'm sorry, she stammered, hugging herself tightly. I thought this was... I must have the wrong address. The man didn't answer immediately. He looked at her, really looked at her. The soaked clothes, the shivering frame, the eyes red from cold, and likely more than just the wind. He could have closed the door. He had every reason to, but he didn't. You'd better come in, he said quietly, stepping aside, before you freeze out here. Jessica hesitated. Her pride urged her to back away, to apologize again and disappear into the snow. But her body, aching and numb, moved on instinct. She stepped over the threshold, and just like that, warmth wrapped around her. Not just from the heat inside, but from something else. Something quieter. Something human. She didn't know it yet, but this small act of kindness, this open door, was about to change everything. Jessica stepped cautiously into the house, her wet boots squeaking against the polished hardwood floor. She barely registered the marble foyer, the high ceilings, the gleaming chandelier overhead. All she felt was heat, a sudden rush of warmth that made her dizzy after so many hours out in the cold. The door closed behind her with a solid thud, shutting out the howling wind. For a moment, the silence was deafening. The man, still watching her carefully, said nothing. He motioned for her to follow. Jessica hesitated, her instincts screaming to keep her guard up. But something about his eyes, quiet, tired but not unkind, made her feet move. She trailed behind him, dripping water with every step, into a large kitchen that smelled faintly of wood polish and fresh coffee. Without a word, the man reached for a towel and handed it to her. She took it with both hands, her fingers shaking, as she pressed it to her face and neck. Then, to her surprise, he opened a cabinet, pulled out a ceramic bowl, and ladled steaming soup into it from a pot on the stove. He set it down on the table and pulled out a chair, gesturing again for her to sit. Jessica blinked, unsure. Was this really happening? She lowered herself into the chair, her hands hovering over the bowl to absorb the warmth. The scent hit her. Chicken. Vegetables, maybe thyme. And it nearly brought her to tears. She hadn't had a hot meal in days. The man sat across from her, arms folded, leaning back in his chair as he studied her. Not like someone being judged, but like someone being understood. Several quiet minutes passed before either of them spoke. "You said you thought this was a shelter," he said finally, voice low and steady. Jessica looked up, cheeks flushed from embarrassment. "I did. I must have gotten the address wrong. I didn't mean to bother you." He raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching ever so slightly. "A shelter, huh?" There was a pause. Then, unexpectedly, he chuckled. Just a small, dry sound, but it cracked, the tension like thunder. Jessica blinked, startled. "I suppose," he said, shaking his head. "It's not the worst mistake someone's made at my door." Jessica let out a laugh, nervous, awkward, almost fragile, but it bubbled up anyway. It had been so long since she'd laughed that the sound felt strange in her throat. But it grew, and so did his. Two strangers, cold and tired, sitting at a kitchen table and laughing like fools. Harold hadn't heard laughter in his house since the day his wife died, and Jessica hadn't felt safe enough to laugh in longer than she could remember. For a brief, fleeting moment, the storm outside no longer mattered. The snow could fall, the wind could scream, but in that kitchen, with a bowl of soup and the warmth of unexpected kindness, something had shifted, and neither of them could quite explain why. The soup was half gone now, and Jessica's hands had finally stopped trembling. The towel was draped across her lap, her coat hanging over the back of the chair, dripping slowly onto the tiled floor. Across the table, Harold sat in silence, eyes resting on the steam rising from his untouched mug of tea. The laughter from moments ago had faded, but something else remained, a thread of connection neither of them could quite name yet. Jessica broke the silence first, her voice quiet. "I used to be a nurse." Harold looked up. "I worked night shifts, long ones. I had a one-bedroom apartment out near the river. My daughter's in college now. Pre-med." She paused, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. "But after the hospital, downsized last year, I was let go. Said they needed to cut costs. 1 week later, I couldn't make rent, the rest." Her voice trailed off. "The rest happened fast." Harold didn't speak. He didn't need to. "I picked up what I could. House, cleaning, elder care, even pet sitting. But those jobs never lasted. Couch surfed for a while, then ran out of couches." She reached for the tea he'd poured earlier and took a sip. It was lukewarm, but comforting. Her eyes stayed fixed on the dark liquid. "It's like once you stop being useful, people just stop seeing you." Harold exhaled slowly. The sound, soft and weary. "Yeah," he murmured, "I know that feeling." Jessica glanced up, surprised. Something in his tone had shifted, like a door cracking open just slightly. "After my wife passed," he continued, "this place, it got real quiet, real fast. Phones stopped ringing, friends stopped visiting, or maybe I stopped answering. I'm not sure anymore." He gave a dry smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "This house used to be full of people. Sunday dinners, piano music, her laughter echoing up the stairs. Now it's just me and the creaking floors." Jessica didn't respond right away. The weight of what he'd said settled between them like thick fog. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said eventually. "How you can have everything, space, money, history, and still feel like you're disappearing." Harold looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't look like a man with silk pajamas and a grand estate. He didn't look like someone out of reach. He looked human, tired, weathered, maybe a little broken, just like her. And somehow, that realization didn't feel sad. It felt grounding. In the flicker of that kitchen light, two people from opposite worlds sat at the same table, not as charity case and host, not as intruder and homeowner, but as equals, as survivors. No titles, no labels, just two souls, each aching to be seen. Outside, the sleet tapped at the windows. The storm hadn't passed, not yet. But inside that warm, quiet room, a fragile peace had settled, and for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt invisible. The fire had dimmed to a soft orange glow. Shadows danced on the kitchen walls as the last of the storm raged outside, wind howling like a warning through the chimney. Jessica sat curled up on a cushioned bench by the window, wrapped in a thick blanket Harold had found upstairs. Her eyes were heavy, but her body was finally warm. Harold stood across the room, hands resting on the back of a chair, his gaze fixed on the window pane where snowflakes gathered like silent witnesses. Minutes passed. Neither of them spoke. Jessica finally stood, brushing down the blanket now folded neatly in her arms. She looked down at the clean floor, the polished furniture, the soft lighting that didn't belong to her world. Her voice cracked slightly as she said, "I should go. You've done more than enough. I don't want to overstay." Harold didn't respond right away. He walked slowly to the front room, peering out the glass door. The snow had piled up, nearly foot deep on the porch and still falling thick. He rubbed his hands together thoughtfully, then turned back to her. "You step outside now, and you're going to freeze before you get halfway down the block," he said, calm but firm. "I'll find somewhere," Jessica replied. But even she didn't believe her own words. Her voice carried more fear than certainty. Harold stepped closer, looked her straight in the eyes, and said something simple. Quiet, but heavy. "Stay." Jessica blinked. "For the night?" He shook his head once. "Not just tonight." She stared at him, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "This house," he said, voice a little softer now, "hasn't had life in it for a long time. Just memories, dust, echoes. You brought something different the second you stepped through that door." Jessica's heart pounded. It wasn't pity in his voice. It was something else. Something far rarer. "I have more space than I'll ever need. And you," he hesitated, "you need a space to exist, to breathe again. It's not charity, it's human, it's balance." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She wasn't used to kindness with no strings. For so long, every offer had a catch, a condition, a limit, but this was different. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," he replied. "You're a reminder that I still have something left to give." She looked away, overwhelmed. Her legs felt shaky, her chest tight, but not with cold this time, with something dangerously close to hope. After a pause, she nodded, small, slow, but certain. That night, something shifted. A man who thought he had nothing left opened his door, not just to a stranger, but to a second chance. And a woman who had braced herself for one more rejection found, instead, a reason to stay. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside, the house, once hollow and still, had finally begun to breathe again. Spring arrived quietly. The snow had long melted from the porch steps, replaced by flower pots and welcome mats. The once silent house at the corner of Maple and Ridgeway no longer echoed with emptiness. It hummed with life. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but day by day, room by room, Jessica and Harold had slowly turned the mansion into something more than just shelter. It became a home. Not just for them, but for others like Jessica. People who had slipped through the cracks. It started with a pot of soup, then a flyer at the community center. Before long, the garage, once full of boxes and dust, was converted into a 500-square-foot community kitchen, funded with Harold savings and furnished with donated tables, secondhand cookware, and a string of lights that blinked like stars. Jessica was at the center of it all. She wore an apron stained with flour and pride. Her hands, once trembling from cold and hunger, now moved with purpose, stirring pots, arranging plates, hugging volunteers. Her laugh echoed through the halls as children ran in and out, dropping off food donations, sneaking cookies when they thought no one was looking. Her energy was magnetic. The kitchen became more than a place to eat. It became a place to be seen, to belong. Seniors came for coffee and conversation. Teenagers dropped by to help out, even if just to feel useful. And slowly, strangers became neighbors. From the front porch, Harold watched it all unfold. He no longer sat alone in his armchair, by the window, staring at silence. Now he sat on the porch, a warm blanket over his knees, sipping tea, nodding greetings to passers-by. His eyes followed the movement in and out of the house like a man watching something sacred come to life. He never said much about the change, but Jessica could see it. In his shoulders, less slouched. In his voice, less brittle. In his eyes, less alone. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast golden light across the yard, Jessica stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron. She spotted Harold sitting under the porch awning, his cup steaming in the breeze. Their eyes met. She waved. He waved back. It was simple, unspoken, but heavy with meaning. This was not the life either of them had imagined. It wasn't part of anyone's 5-year plan, but it was real. It was earned, and it mattered. A woman who had once been invisible was now the heart of a home. And a man who had once believed his purpose had passed found it again, not in power or legacy, but in the simple act of keeping his door open. It all started with a knock, a mistake, a desperate moment on a freezing night. And now that same doorstep, welcomed dozens every week. No judgment, no questions, just warmth and food and human connection. Jessica and Harold didn't save each other. They saw each other, and in that, they both found something more powerful than survival. They found belonging. We'd love to hear from you. Stories like Jessica and Harold's remind us that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, a door opened, a meal shared, can change everything. Have you ever experienced a moment like that? A time when someone unexpected reached out, or when you offered help to a stranger and it led to something meaningful? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Whether it's a memory, a personal story, or just how this video made you feel, we read every message. Your words might inspire someone else who's going through a tough time right now. Let's make this comment section a place of warmth, connection, and real human stories. And while you're here, don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. If this touched your heart, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. We've got another emotional, powerful story coming tomorrow that might just stay with you long after the video ends. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for keeping kindness alive, one comment at a time.